Welcome to the ID Mixer overview for iD14. This tutorial will show you all the features in the ID app and some suggestions as to how you can use them. If you have an iD14 and haven't already installed the app, please download it from our website. If you need instructions on how to install it, these can be found in the Quick Start Guide which comes with the unit, the Quick Start video manual linked here, and the PDF manual. So let's go over the different parts of the ID Mixer. To start with, we have three different types of input channels. These are the analog inputs, the digital inputs, and the DAW returns. Each is color-coded at the top with blue, green, and pink bars respectively. Firstly, we have the two blue analog channels, which display signal present on the preamps, whether it is the mic, line, or the DI input. The green digital channels show the signal on the digital input. Depending on whether you have ADAT or SPDIF set and the sample rate you have chosen, the number of channels in the mixer will change automatically. Both of these channel types feature a plus 10 dB software boost for low-level signals, as well as a polarity reversal button, which lets you flip the polarity of incoming signals. This is really useful, for example, if you are recording both the top and bottom of a snare drum and you want to record the two sources in phase. The final channel type is the pink DAW return. This shows the signal coming back from your DAW. So in your DAW, you will see four outputs available for iD14. By default, outputs 1 and 2 will most likely be selected as your output pair. This is then visible on the DAW 1 and 2 channel in the ID Mixer. The same goes for sending audio out of outputs 3 and 4 from your DAW. They will appear in the DAW 3 and 4 channel in the ID Mixer. Each of the channels has a naming strip along the bottom, which can be edited by double-clicking on it and typing what you want. This allows you to name specific channels with up to 8 characters, helping you navigate the ID app a little bit easier. Now I will take you through the various elements of the mixer. Firstly, we have the main mix fader. This controls how much signal from that input channel will get sent to the main mix bus. In a basic setup, the main mix bus will be sent to the speakers and the headphones, so you need to turn up the main mix fader on any channel that you want to hear. To be able to hear your DAW or the general audio from your computer, you'll probably want to turn up DAW 1 and 2 fader when it's stereo linked. And then using the main mix pan pot, hard pan it left and right to get stereo audio. Next to the main mix fader, you have the channel meter. This shows what level is coming into that channel, and displays a numerical readout of the level below it. The top LED on this meter is the peak LED, and it'll show you when you have exceeded the maximum input level. This LED can be reset by clicking on it, or you can reset all of them in the mixer by pressing Alt and then clicking on one of them. This meter has a range of 66 dB, and can be used to set the appropriate input level on the mic preamps. The final part of the main mix controls are the cut and solo. Just like how you would use on a console, you can solo and mute various elements of your mix. These functions are useful if you want to quickly listen to certain elements of your audio. For example, if you want to listen to the raw input signal coming from the mic but you don't want to hear any of the other pre-recorded material in your DAW. Another useful feature here is that if you click on an active solo while holding the Command or Control key, depending on whether you're on Mac or Windows, you will clear all the solos on the whole mixer. Alternatively, while still holding these buttons, if you click on an unsoloed channel, you can toggle between an already soloed channel. Above the main mix pan controls are the parameter info boxes. Normally this displays the main pan position. However, if you hover your mouse over a different parameter such as the cue volume for example, it will display its value. Here you also have the stereo linking button, which allows you to change whether a channel is mono or stereo. When a channel is set to stereo, the levels are joined into one control so you can easily move the left and right channels equally. The pan controls, however, remain individual to allow a bit more flexibility. Typically you will want the DAW return channels to be stereo linked because unless you set it otherwise, generally a DAW will have a stereo output. Further up the mixer window we have the cue section. This allows you to send the incoming audio to the cue bus. In the same way that you can create a balance of input channels using the main mix faders, you can also do the same thing here with the cue faders. A common use for this feature is creating a headphone mix for an artist. You can build up a combination of their live mic signals, as well as pre-recorded material from the DAW, while you or whoever is in charge of the session can be listening to a separate mix from the DAW at the main mix output. The cue mix routing is controlled in the system panel, which I'll cover in a minute. This brings us onto the master section. The cue master is the overall level of the cue mix, and you can press the solo button to listen to the cue mix out of your main outputs. This gives you a good idea of what an artist is going to be listening to if you're using it for a headphone mix, for example. Next to this we have the main meters. This displays the level of the main mix. So if you have none of the main faders turned up, you will get no level in the main meter. This is a good first place to look if you find you're not getting any level out of your speakers. It could be that you have something muted or a fader is not turned up when it should be. The channel view buttons let you see what you want to see in the ID mixer. If you aren't expanding iD14 digitally, then there is no need for the digital inputs to be visible. Similarly, if you're mixing and not tracking, then you'll probably only want the DAW returns visible, or maybe nothing at all. The monitor section of the master section allows you to control the volume of the outputs, but also the various monitoring functions that iD14 has to offer. To change the volume of the speaker or the headphone outputs, you can use these knobs. The info boxes above show the level that each output has been set to. This is linked in hardware, so when you change the output level on iD14 itself using the encoder, you will also see it change in the ID app. This is also true when you mute each output. If you want to mute an output in software, you just need to click on the corresponding icon. A muted output will be displayed in white, and when it is active, it will be green. You will also see this happening when you press the encoder when an output is selected. By clicking on the ID icon, you can set the function that you want the ID button to control. By default, it is set to scroll control. This allows you to turn iD14's volume encoder into a virtual scroll wheel, allowing you to change any parameter in your DAW or plugins that are scroll wheel enabled. This is great for getting a more organic feeling into your automation, and you can get some really creative results. But please check out this linked video to see a bit more about how you can use it. The ID button also has the option to control the different monitor functions underneath the volume knobs. These are mono, which is great if you need to check that your mix translates well to a mono output. This is common with media for mobile devices, for example, which tend to only have one speaker. You can also control mono and polarity together. This cancels the center of the stereo signal, essentially leaving only the far left and far right of the signal. This provides a great way to listen to stereo content such as reverbs, and also lets you pick up some tricks from the pros while listening to existing material. There is also the option of talkback control. With one of the mic preamps, either internal or digitally connected, you can set it to be a talkback microphone. By selecting this as the ID button, whenever you press it, it'll dim the output and send your voice into the Q mix, but I'll go over this a bit more in a minute. Finally, you have a dim control, which reduces the level of the main mix by a fixed amount of 15 dB. You're still able to individually control these different functions even if you don't set them as the ID button. The System Panel button is found just below the main meters in the Master section, which is where all of the settings for iD14 are configured. The first two settings are to do with the digital input. Depending on what you choose, the mixer will expand or contract its channel count. So SPDIF uses only 2 channels, whereas ADAT uses 8 channels at 44.1 and 48 kHz, and 4 channels at 88.2 and 96 kHz SMUX. Underneath we have the preferred clock source. If you have a piece of gear hooked up to the digital input, then you'll want to have it set to optical, so you can make the iD14 the slave. If you have it set to optical, iD14 will search for a clock signal on the optical input, and if it doesn't find one, it will just revert back to the internal clock. The status light tells you whether there is a valid clock source on the optical input. If the light is green, then there is a valid clock source and you're good to go. If it's yellow, then there is a clock signal present, however the sample rates are mismatched. So just double check that the sample rate of the external device is the same as iD14's and your DAW session. A red status light means that there is no clock source on the optical input. So if you're expecting one, you need to check your optical connection. If you aren't using any digital gear, then the status light will remain red and you don't need to worry about it. Below there is the Talkback Assign button, which allows you to choose one of the inputs, both analog or digital, to be a talkback channel. When you pick an input, the channel in the mixer will change into a talkback channel strip, which is identified with a yellow bar on the top. A talkback channel removes the main mix fader to prevent feedback with your speakers by not routing the talkback signal to the main mix outputs. It can be only sent to the Q mix. The main mix pan control is also replaced with a talkback button, allowing you to activate talkback from the channel itself, as well as in the master section, or using the ID button if you have it configured in that way. You still have access to the plus 10 dB boost and the polarity functions on this channel as well. The mono mode lets you choose whether activating the mono button creates a mono sum in one loudspeaker, either left or right, or creates a phantom center sum. These sound slightly different, so have a listen, but by default it is set to center. Next we have the output routing. This is where you configure what gets sent to the main output or the headphone output. Your choices here are main mix, which as explained earlier is whatever you have turned up on the main mix faders, Q mix, which is whatever you have turned up on the Q faders on each channel, as well as the Q master, and DAW through, which allows you to bypass all the monitor controls and essentially hardwire the output of your DAW to the physical output. So for example, if you have the main output set to DAW through, whatever you have sent to outputs 1 and 2 in your DAW will go straight to the main output. Similarly, if you have the headphones set to DAW through, anything you send to outputs 3 and 4 in your DAW will go straight to the headphone output. A good example of a use for this is if you want to use the main outputs to feed a headphone amplifier, and you don't need the iD14 volume control because you have individual controls on the amp. It is worth mentioning that DAW through sends the signal out at full volume as if the iD14 volume encoder was turned all the way up, so you need to be careful setting outputs to DAW through because it could be very loud and give you a nasty surprise. However, you will be warned of this when you click on DAW through. If you're just wanting to use speakers and headphones to listen to a mix, then you most likely want to set both outputs to main mix. However, if you are tracking and want to make a separate headphone mix for the artist, then it could be worth creating a Q mix and setting the phone's output to be fed from there. In this situation, consider sending the elements of pre-recorded material you want to an auxiliary in your DAW with its output set to 3 and 4. This way it comes in on the DAW 3 and 4 channel in the iD mixer, and you can choose whether or not to listen to it and to send it to the Q mix. This way you can send that to the headphones without having to listen to it yourself if you want to hear the full mix coming out of DAW 1 and 2. Finally, we have the save and load buttons. These let you save and load your mixer presets, so if you have different ones for different situations, then you can recall them when necessary. You can save and load from a list of presets, or alternatively, you can save and load from a file, which is useful if you want to keep everything for your projects in the same place, so you can store the iD mixer settings in the folder with your DAW project. Thank you for watching this software overview. If you need any more information on how to set up iD14, please check out our other videos, have a look at our iD14 support page, linked here, or look through the PDF manual.